All right. Here we are. I think we're live now. Let's wait for the audio to catch up. All right. This is weird. Hold on. A little technical difficulty right now. All right. This is weird. There we go. Perfect. All right. Now, so audio is good. Looks nice. Let's here again make sure that we're all golden. Audio is good. Looks nice. Perfect. I like that. All right, now, here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another installment of the Pale Galilean. And as you can tell by our wonderful title, we are now on part 3 of reviewing the debate between David Wood and Daniel Haqiqatjou of the Muslim Skeptic. These two gentlemen should need no introduction if you've seen the last two parts, and for anybody that wants to be involved, I recommend you check those things out. It's a very, very good debate that shows the error of David Wood's Christianity, specifically how it is far more invested in Western liberalism than it is with the authentic claims that Christianity makes for itself. And Daniel Haqiqatjou has to this point, which I think we are at. I'm gonna get the stream up here so y'all can see it. There you go. Because right here we are about at the 1 hour 36 minute and 16 second marker, and Daniel Haqiqatjou has been absolutely dominating over David Wood completely. It has been a slaughter for David Wood's side so far, and that's because David Wood is more liberal than he is Christian, unfortunately. And that's just the sad fact of reality at the moment. Now we're going to see if David Wood can kind of pull this out and kind of like really clutch it towards the end here, which we will bear witness to in the next couple hours. And there's two people in the audience, so hello everybody. Now there's one person in the audience. Hello, little person. Make yourself comfortable. If you want to join, the link is both in the description and it is right there if you are so inclined to join in the comment section. It should be pinned. Let me make sure it's pinned for you. It is pinned. Okay. So without further ado, I can mute up and let's begin.
Then how do you interpret all of these Christians throughout history, all of the Christian Roman emperors in the Catholic Church that were killing heretics? In Jesus' name because of their beliefs.
I can tell you. Yeah, I could give you.
You're going to denounce all of that.
This is my take on this. Right? For 3 centuries, Christians didn't kill anyone. It never occurred to them that they're supposed to control the world. According to the New Testament, the harshest penalty that the church gives as the church is excommunication. Paul says, who am I to judge those outside the church? God will judge those outside the church. So the Christian concept, as far as penalties and so on, hey, you don't want to follow the rules of Christianity. There's the door over there. There's the door. Christians don't cause any problems and will generally be fine under various governments. When Christianity permeated the Roman Empire, the Emperor Constantine eventually gets so he's a pagan, but he gets a dream and he sees a cross. And he in this dream, which he interprets as revelation, it says, conquer by this. So he's supposed to conquer by the cross. What you have there, again, this is my take. What you have after that is a sort of Christian Roman Empire hybrid. And the Roman Empire had a Roman Empire kind of way of doing things. The ideals of the Roman Empire are crush everything that gets in our way, destroy. We have to control the world. We have to conquer. And then now it becomes, and we're doing this with Jesus. We're doing this with Jesus. We're doing this with Christianity. So it's my view that these ideas don't come from Christianity. You never get the idea from the Apostle Paul or from the teachings of Jesus.
Jesus said, render.
Okay, here we really need to address this because this is what I've been talking about in the last two parts, what David Wood has. He has a completely, his Christianity is completely rotted out by liberal principles. The Christianity that he is mentioning is something that milquetoast could never do harm and cannot be a danger to anyone. That's a dangerous Christianity to hold because it inherently takes an idea of a pseudo-pacifism. But here's the issue with that. This is the danger of separating yourself from the church and the church's history. Because when the New Testament was being written and when Paul was preaching, the church was in her infancy. She was nothing more than a minority among the minorities of the time. So what Christians needed back then from Paul was to establish what this thing called Christianity even is. That's what the whole New Testament is dedicated to. It's dedicated to first articulating what exactly Christianity is. That's what the writings of Paul, of Peter, of James, of what's another one? Timothy. Well, actually, Timothy didn't write. These are letters to Timothy. But that's what John is writing about. Matthew, Luke, Mark. All of these men within the New Testament are articulating exactly what Christianity is. So now the question remains, what do we do when we get the reins of power? Because Christianity inherited the Roman Empire. The Constantine became Christian. And to be fair, there's no, like, how should I say this? There is no commandment within the New Testament of what Christians ought to do when they have the reins of power. And so what Constantine's understanding is that God was revealing to him revelation as a way of going forward now that he is a Christian emperor, and now that now that Christianity is the rule of the day in the empire. How do you negotiate this now? Oh, hey, Diego's here. Hey, Diego. Oh, by the way, you can just call me Fro. That is still my username. That's still what I'm going from. I am in fact Fro. Pale Galilean is just the name of the channel, my friend. And thank you. I hope you go and enjoy this. Go away, phone. Okay, so now getting back to it, what not Daniel, David. The two D's are confusing. What David is doing here, he has a milquetoast understanding of Christianity that can do no wrong, that simply could never harm someone if it tried, and that is the issue. That if Christianity doesn't pose some element of danger in some way, right? If it doesn't pose some use of force, some will of force, it would have been exterminated by different religions and different cultures a very, very long time ago. Violence is necessary in the Christian life as a way of preserving itself. That's how every religion, every culture, every way of life has always been preserved, because it needs to defend itself by subversive actions. David Wood has no idea or has no conception of that Christianity is a civilization that needs to be defended. With David Wood, his Christianity is every bit as exchangeable as, well, the clothes he wears. And that's ultimately where he comes from. Hold on. Do I know who is in your profile picture? Actually, I do not, Diego. I can't say I do. It looks like how to put it? It looks like a European monarch of some sort. I'm going to go with St. Louis XII. But considering you're Spanish, I'm going to say it's probably a Spanish saint of some sort. You're going to have to fill me in on who that is. Anyway, now, with David's problem is that he assumes liberalism as true before he assumes Christianity is true. And this is going to be a huge issue moving forward. Like right off the bat. Let's continue on.
Unto Caesar what is Caesar's. So he actually does explicitly endorse Caesar. He does endorse actually the Roman Empire.
Yeah, but that's not him controlling it. I mean, that's a pagan Roman emperor. That's Tiberius.
Exactly.
So it's Jesus. Jesus.
But you're not going that far. You're saying that you're actually distancing Christianity from the actions of Constantine and these other figures, authoritative figures, Theodosius, and the ones who are killing all of the heretics that are killing the pagan blasphemers.
This is the opposite.
Oh my God! I thought so. Okay, so King David holding the tablet of Psalm 86. Okay, well, it's definitely European artwork. Then it looks beautiful nonetheless. for a minute, I almost would have thought it would have been Moses having a tablet of some sort, but now I said it's King David. That's really interesting, Diego. Oh, by the way, if you ever want to join the show, by all means, the links in the description in the chat. Anyway, now what's what Daniel Haqiqatjou just described is entire slam dunk on Wood's position, and here's why. It's not just that Christian emperors used force. It's not just that Constantine and all of his heirs and descendants of the empire used force against pagans and heretical groups of pseudo-Christians. It is that the fact that these actions go universally uncondemned by the whole of the Christian community. For instance, when Constantine destroys pagan temples that used to be Christian land, because essentially what happened is some land that Constantine confiscated from the pagan religions of the Roman Empire initially belonged to Christian churches. Those churches were demolished and temples were built on top of them. Now Constantine's doing the reverse. He is demolishing the temples and rebuilding churches on top where they had once stood. So what's going on here is that this action goes universally uncondemned by the Christians of his day. There's not a single bishop, not a single priest, not a single layperson that condemns the actions of Constantine. In a similar way, when was it Theodosius? Yeah, when Theodosius, wait, was it Theodosius or someone later? I think it was Theodosius, yes. When Theodosius makes practicing paganism a capital offense in Rome and Constantinople, nobody bats an eye. There's not a single Christian emperor, not a single Christian emperor, not a single bishop, not a single priest, nobody that even thinks this is such a controversial move. And for Christians to have such opinions so early on is a damnation of Wood's position here, because what's going on is that Christianity in the time of these emperors, in the time of the contemporary bishops, they see Christianity as a civilization, and civilizations need to be defended. And to defend a civilization, it requires a level of force. It's what you need to defend your people, to defend your civilization, to bring the church into everlasting salvation. This is what was understood very early on in Christian history, very early on. And David Wood, because he assumes liberalism, which is a very, very, very new philosophy, a new kid on the block, and assumes that over the old kids, right? He's assuming something new that has no precedent in the millennia that come before it. Let's see. No, Diego. I'm working on it. I do not have a PhD right now. I don't even have a bachelor's yet, but as I said, I am working on it. What you see before you is the culmination of 5 years of independent study. And hopefully, God willing, if he's merciful to me, I will have the opportunity to study that far more academically, and I can bring you much more content that is even better than what I'm making now, God willing. I'm going to mute up and we'll continue on.
Opposite of what you just said. So Jesus sees no conflict between having obligations to a non-Christian government and having your obligation towards God. So you have your obligations towards God, you have your obligations towards your government, which isn't even a Christian government. What I'm saying is,
what obligations?
Then those two things combined. Well, I mean, if you're talking about obligations to a government, that would be, I mean, in that case, it's paying taxes. You had an obligation to pay taxes.
So you have to support the invasion, you have to support the killing, you have to support with your taxes, as you mentioned, all of this expansionist war, all of the torture, all of the slavery, all of the sex slavery. This is what Caesar is doing. And Jesus is saying, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. So that's an endorsement.
And Haqiqatjou has a point here, but not in the way you might think. And again, actually, what Haqiqatjou is citing, he's actually citing a verse that runs contrary to his own beliefs, though he doesn't realize it yet. Because Jesus saying, render unto Caesar what is Caesar and render unto God what is God's, is a concept virtually foreign in the whole of Islam. And the reason being is because there's no distinction between the ruling government and God himself. Because in Islam, they don't have this understanding of secularism. Islam has this understanding that the people in charge are given charge by God himself. They are the clergy and the emperor. Okay, when Jesus says, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and render unto God what is God's," the implication there is that God seeks something that Caesar can't have, and Caesar seeks something that God doesn't want. That's the thing. That is the issue at stake here. And it is actually this verse that serves as the foundation for modern day secularism, because when Augustine is writing his magnum opus, City of God, he uses this verse to illustrate the difference between the holy, representative of the church, and the profane, which is representative of, well, secular government, of the emperor, of the president, of the prime minister, of worldly leaders. And so what's going on here is that Haqiqatjou is essentially giving David Wood ammunition here, because this is a verse that actually confirms modern day secular governments, something Haqiqatjou has said beyond a shadow of a doubt is haram, cannot be established. And yet we have Jesus here establishing the foundation of what would later be known as secularism. So this is an ammunition, this is a major bullet that Haqiqatjou is giving to Wood. And I guarantee you, when I press play, Wood doesn't even have the wherewithal to be able to use it. Now, what's going on with David Wood is that, again, because he's assuming liberalism, it doesn't even occur to him that the violence that we see clearly in the Old Testament, the force we see in the Old Testament, is, in fact, kind of mandated by God himself. He doesn't understand that. It's gone right over his head. And so the whole issue here is that, once more, we have an example where his secularism is triumphing over his Christianity because he sees one as the other. And unfortunately, that's a problem with a lot of Christians today, both from the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. Now, this originated with the Protestant Church, but it's unfortunately bled over to a lot of different people. And it's an unfortunate shame. Yeah, let's continue on, ladies and gentlemen.
How is your interpretation that you mentioned several times? This is my interpretation. This is my interpretation. Okay, I don't really care for your interpretation. I want to know what Christianity actually says. And I consider these figures within Christian history much more authoritative than you. I mean, Augustine also justified persecuting heretics.
Correct. He absolutely did. Augustine, and I think I could be wrong on this, but I think it was his 85th letter to Eusebius, absolutely justified persecuting enemies of the church, heretics of his own day. Now, this is a little bit more nuanced than Haqiqatjou is offering here, because originally Augustine did not want to use force, not want to use coercion. He wanted to use convincing. He wanted to use sound, reasonable arguments. This later fell through when it became abundantly clear that the degeneracy of the heresies that were being presented were far more powerful than mere evangelization could do. And in his diocese and where he was ruling, these heresies served to subvert his authority as its bishop, served to subvert the rule of Christ. And so because of this, Augustine then sought the help of the emperor to lay these heretics to rest. And by that, I don't mean killing, I mean some other form of persecution. Typically, when it comes to persecution, there will be some form of violence used against the church's enemies. It doesn't always necessitate in death, like we see with capital punishments in the Inquisitions, for instance. But what it will entail is some use of force as a way of protecting Christianity from subversive elements. And once more, Augustine is an authority within Christianity, and David Wood is a PhD. He knows as well as I do that Augustine is overwhelmingly praised by both Catholics and Protestants and Orthodox Christians alike. The Christian world over, he is loved. And so when Augustine says something, it carries some measure of weight to it. And it is going to be very interesting to see how David Wood kind of tries to spin this to his favor, if he can at all. Let's see.
Right? You're quoting Augustine, but he's also justifying that in his books.
And what I'm saying is, if you look at what Jesus said, you don't get the idea that you're supposed to go around killing heretics.
He said, when you render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. That is an endorsement of that government, which was killing heretics, killing. That's the tradition that you're citing, right? With Constantine.
That government, what heretic?
No. Wrong. Thing about it is, Haqiqatjou isn't right here. What Jesus is endorsing is the security that the Roman Empire has. For instance, in Paul, he says that whoever is in power due to the will of Christ, right? In fact, Christ, on the day of his crucifixion, says to Pontius Pilate that you would not have charge over me if it were not that the Most High wills to give it to you. I think that's a paraphrase, but that's essentially what Christ says to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. So what's going on here is that when Jesus says, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, you render unto Caesar because Caesar may be immoral. He may be committing mass degeneracy the globe over, but nonetheless has a certain virtue in so much that he is protecting the sanctity of the empire, right? So in that way, you are to give to Caesar, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, in that particular way. What are you trying to say, Jay? Okay. He was answering a particular question. He said that. Okay, exactly, Jamie. So, what's going on here is that this is in no way an endorsement of the Roman Empire. It is an endorsement of the sanctity of the empire. That's all it is, of the right the empire has to protect itself, militaristically and otherwise. Now, what's going on here is that how should I say this? When you shouldn't say that because Jesus says render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. It is a exaltation, or it is a rubber stamp of that government. Shouldn't say that at all. That's the wrong interpretation to use. Hold on, I'm getting some technical difficulties here. Hi, Jamie. Nice to see you too. Just a moment, everybody. Oh no. Okay, can't do that. Crap. Okay, I'm back. Real technical difficulties, everyone. Hi, Jamie. All right, let's get back to where we were. Let me share my screen real quick. Tab. Yeah, I think this is where we left off on. Let's see. Perfect, okay. Now, I'm going to replay the last stuff 10 seconds here. Make it 20, just to be sure.
Is, if you look at what Jesus said, you don't get the idea that you're supposed to go around killing heretics.
He said, when you render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. That is an endorsement of that government, which was killing heretics, killing. That's the tradition that you're citing, right? With Constantine.
So let me comment on that real quick. So what's going on here is that, as I said before, when Jesus is rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, what that means is that Caesar has a certain right to rule, in so much he provides security and law to the empire. Paul later affirms this within the book of Romans, I think. I might be mistaken on that citation there. But moreover, what's going on here is that, how should I say this? David Wood is very much confused here, because David Wood, how should I say this? David Wood is appealing to Christianity through the lens of the New Testament alone. He is trying to live Christianity by the historical times of the New Testament and what the church was in Roman times. The issue is that we're no longer living in Roman times. The New Testament times have come and they have gone. We're no longer living under those times. The boot of the Roman Empire has long since withered. It no longer is with us. And so what David Wood is utterly unable to answer is how is Christianity supposed to live and understand itself when it holds the reins of power? Because when the New Testament was written, when Jesus was preaching, when Paul was preaching, when the church was establishing herself as a mere seedling, it was a minority among minorities. Okay? Later on, by the time Constantine takes over, Christianity has the reins of power. It has the rules of day. There are major noble Roman houses that are Christian now. Over a fifth of the empire is Christian and rising, because Christianity started as a slave religion, and from there it just kept expanding to the point where 2 to 3 fifths of the empire became Christian by the time Constantine came to power. Rather, it was 1/5 by the time Constantine came to power, and it was abundantly clear it was not stopping. The pagan religions of Rome had an expiration date by the time Constantine took the throne. He knew this. And so now the Christianity had a question that it was now asking itself. Now that we have the visible reins of power, how are we supposed to use them? And this is the issue. How should I put it? This question was answered the same way the question of circumcision was answered, because in Jesus' earthly ministry, he never said one jot and one tittle, not one whisper, about the issue of circumcision. It took the first church council to authoritatively rule on this as a way of understanding the church's place in the light of circumcision. And in the same way, it took a council as a way of establishing the church's answer of how are we to now regulate ourselves now that we have power. And that's where you have Constantine convening the Council of Nicaea. One of many, by the way. That's where you have many different people, many different bishops coming to terms with how we are to reconcile how to put it, ecclesiastical courts with secular ones. So David Wood seems to want to live in wants to live out a Christianity that simply cannot live in today's day and age, because he wants to live out a Christianity that had a constant boot over it, that was powerless. We don't live in those times anymore. These questions that David is being asked of him were answered literally over 1,000 years ago. And so the issue that David has is that because he wants to assume Western liberalism, he wants to assume that religion is kind of almost a pacifist tool of some sort. Hey, Diego, you said something here. Have I been to Europe, Fro? Absolutely not. I have not been to Europe. I want to make a few pilgrimage there, especially to Auschwitz-Birkenau and the Sistine Chapel. And maybe Our Lady of Lourdes if possible. But that's not going to happen anytime soon, though. But I would like to visit those places, make pilgrimages there at some point. Anyway, let's now turn back to David's failure. Oh, and again, Jamie, I offered, how would I put it? I offered Diego the same privilege. You can come into the show anytime you want. Just comment around, be another commentator. Okay, so Jamie, you say everyone knows that when you pay someone that you owe them for a service means you endorse anything and all things the debtor has done. Absolutely, you get it, Jamie. Absolutely, thank you. I think you put it better than I could have. Thank you.
That government, what heretics was the Roman government?
Jesus Christ, he
killing?
was crucified, right? According to.
No, you're a little confused. You're a little confused as to what I'm saying.
Jesus is. Did you forget that Jesus was being persecuted?
Jesus is talking about paying taxes to the government, right? So Jesus said, "Hey, you've got a government, and
that's your interpretation, right? That's not what.
When he says render to Caesar, it
means just taxes.
That's what he said right there. That's
Render
exactly what it was.
Caesar,
Should we pay the tax? Do you not know the actual story?
I know how Christians have interpreted that statement.
No, it's exactly the situation that they were actually in. Someone comes to his enemies come to him and say, "Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar?"
Oh my goodness gracious! Hey, Praise, what's going on? Nice to see you, buddy. Yeah, listen, if you want to come into the chat, if you want to come into the studio, I'm not going to be adverse to this. Anyway, this has been a long time coming. Part 3 of my review between Haqiqatjou and Wood. Okay, Diego, you got something to say too. My uncle, who is a priest, has been to Europe and the Holy Land. I am very, very jealous. I need to do a pilgrimage there too, because the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is just, I want to be there, definitely. Okay, now. What's going on here? This is the one valid point in this entire debate that I'm aware of that Wood has actually made a valid point. Because, well, he's absolutely right. This is not how Christians have understood this verse. And Jamie says it best. Just because you pay someone what you owe them for a service doesn't mean you endorse anything and everything they do. This is correct. On this one, Haqiqatjou is clearly mistaken in his understanding of the verse. Render unto Caesar what is Caesar does not mean that you support any moral or immoral action that he commits to. It just means you render a service. You have a service that he provides, you pay for. That's what it means. On this one thing, Wood is actually correct. Surprisingly enough, I didn't think that Wood could actually be right for once in over an hour and a half of debating this man. I did not know that. It's good to see you too, Praise. Nice to please make yourself at home if you got time. Okay, let's see. Yep, you looks like Diego is a fan of you too, Praise. Let's move on.
Or not, right? So they're trying to trap him here, because if he says, yes, we pay taxes to Caesar, the sort of the Jews who wanted to rebel against the empire are now going to hate Jesus. If he says, no, we don't pay taxes to Caesar, then the Romans would crush him. Either way, he's in trouble. And he says, show me a coin that you used to pay the tax. And they show him a coin with a picture of Tiberius Caesar on it. He says, render to Caesar what's Caesar's. So that's, in other words, hey, that's his inscription. If he wants the coin, give him the coin. He doesn't seem to. The point is, this is not something we're going to fight over. It's his coin. It's his coin. Give it to him, right? So
we can take your interpretation of
that's not. That's exactly what the story. That's exactly what the story says.
Saying what have Christians taken from
when I
say story?
When I talk about my interpretation, I was talking about how later on.
To answer Wood's argument very quick, what the interpretation of the story is to be taken is that render unto Caesar what is Caesar, render unto God what is God's. As in, there is something that belongs to God that Caesar can't have. That's what you render unto God. And there's something you render unto Caesar that God doesn't want. That's what you render unto Caesar. So the idea here, and again, I've said this before, Augustine uses this verse serves as the establishment of secular authority. Again, this is a incredible, valuable ammunition that Wood so far is not utilizing. I don't expect that to change, but let's see if he does. I'll be very. He's right so far in addressing that Haqiqatjou has the wrong interpretation here, but let's see if he can carry it out.
How later on, you're talking about centuries later. Again, three centuries of Christianity. If you're a heretic, the message is, there's the door, dude. We'll try and convince you otherwise, but if you're not going to listen to the leaders in the church,
Christians weren't in power to Christians weren't in power to impose those kinds of laws in those centuries. It only was with Constantine. It was only with this conversion of the Roman Empire to Catholicism that they had the power. And as soon as they got power, as you just cited yourself with Constantine, they started killing in the name of the cross.
You should know very well, you don't, if you really want to kill someone, you really want to kill a heretic, you don't need to have political power. We see jihadis.
Yes,
we see jihadis going around. No, you don't. Jihadis go around killing people all the time. You can be a vigilante. You can do all kinds of things. The point is, you don't.
Oh, that was such a bad take. That was such a bad take. Okay. The thing about it is, David, jihadis wouldn't be killing people, would not be setting off bombs, would not be persecuting the enemies of Allah if it weren't for the political power that the Quran gives them. Now, it might be illegitimate political power in the context in which they use it, such as in Western nations, but nonetheless, it is political power in which they are utilizing. Okay? So already you have something very, very, very mistaken, misguided right there. David Wood seems to have the understanding that unless you are a civilly sanctioned government with some form of elected official with civil authority and power, you can't make use of political power. It's not what's going on at all. For instance, the protest / uprising / sedition at the Capitol on January 6th, for better or for worse, was the common, everyday man, the unelected official, the non-politician, utilizing political power for their own means and goals. That's what happened, for better or for worse. What happens when jihadis set off a car bomb and kill a bunch of people? That is them utilizing political power through terror, for better or for worse. That's what they're doing. Okay? Now, I am not saying that I'm not trying to compare jihadis to the Capitol, to the January 6th Capitol rioters. I think there's a clear difference between these two groups. But they are both utilizing political power to achieve means for their ends. Okay? Now, Haqiqatjou here, under no circumstances, actually objects to the cause of jihad. In fact, in some ways, I think he's been very open with the idea that terrorist acts can be validated. And if I'm mistaken in that, I apologize. I'll correct myself immediately. But if I remember correctly, I don't think I am. And so what Haqiqatjou understands, he understands that the common man can take up arms and carry political power himself. Now, whether or not that will have a positive response for the guilty party remains to be seen. Okay? So certainly he understands that there will be a response to this, but nonetheless recognizes it is political power that these groups are utilizing. David Wood, because he does not understand his Christianity outside of a context of liberalism, is unable to compute the fact that Christianity might be political, that there can be political forces at work that have clear, tangible religious roots. It blows right past his mind. Let's keep going.
Get the idea, kill heretics from Jesus. The only example you have is people coming to kill him, and he says, don't defend me. If Jesus says, don't defend me, and that's the situation, right? I mean, that's the situation. That's the perfect situation to defend him. His followers were ready to do it, and he says, don't do it. Again, who am I? There's nothing that comes after this. Right? There isn't a revelation that comes after this and says, oh, by the way, now it's time to start killing people. So all I have is the example of Jesus, who says, don't defend him in that way. And so, yeah,
but if you
I don't know what you
But that's not the only example you have, David. That is not the only example you have. Because, again, we don't live in the New Testament anymore. Okay? When Christianity was in its infancy, yeah, we were in our infancy. We were just getting a bearing on what Christianity is. But that's not the only example you have. There are like 19, maybe there are like 20 centuries of Christian history separating us from Christ. Okay? You mean to tell me within those 20 centuries you can't find another example of how to justly use power? Really? Is that going to be your argument? And here's the thing, Haqiqatjou is right here on this issue because we have Christian emperors, Christian bishops. Like again, Augustine's a good example, using using force against heretics as a way of crushing their subversion. What is David Wood going to do about this? So the answer is nothing. He can do nothing about this because, again, liberalism is what stops him from understanding how to even reconcile the clear disconnect in his Christianity. It's plain as the nose on your face, ladies and gentlemen. You see, Haqiqatjou understands, unfortunately, Haqiqatjou understands what historic Christianity looks like better than David Wood does. That is a very, very bad shame, but it's true. It's true nonetheless. And this is one of the things you have to be careful of, ladies and gentlemen, because if you adopt liberalism as preeminent, or even liberalism at all, I would argue, against Christianity or over Christianity, these two worldviews are going to naturally contradict and conflict with each other, because in order to make them compatible, in order to make them like feasibly anywhere coherent, you need to separate Christianity from its history. Daniel Haqiqatjou understands this. David Wood does not. And the more we're watching this, the more apparent that is.
Jesus' example, look, there's multiple contradictions I'm pointing out. If you take Jesus's example of not lifting the sword, don't defend yourself against violence, turn the other cheek, these aren't rules that you can extrapolate and make rules for an entire Christian nation. Otherwise, Christianity would have been wiped out within, the first few centuries. That's the main point that I'm trying to make, but you just keep referring to, okay, well, Jesus didn't say this, Jesus didn't say that. But those aren't rules that can be applied on a macro scale. And this seems to be a problem for your interpretation of Christianity. Other Christians throughout history did not share your interpretation. They did engage in execution of blasphemers. They did execute the apostates. They look at the Justinian, look at the Byzantine Empire, look at the Spanish Reconquista. They all had this interpretation that is much in line with actually what we find in Islam. You're the only one, and Christians who follow this kind of liberalized Christianity, you're the only one who does not see that.
No, I'm looking at the Bible. Again, there's no indication. There's no indication. When the harshest penalty of the church is, there's the door, you're excommunicated. And we see when violence starts, it's when you get this Roman Christian hybrid. Again, I don't see anything in Christianity that says go kill and slaughter unbelievers, go kill heretics, kill apostates, anything like that.
Really? You don't? Again, for David Wood to assert this, it requires him to ignore the next 1900 years of church history. There's no other way to interpret this. Here's the thing, Haqiqatjou is absolutely right. The idea that killing blasphemers and heretics and apostates, well, maybe not killing them, but using violence and force against them, the idea this was wrong is a Protestant, it is a Enlightenment invention. It is Enlightenment understanding rooted and made from Enlightenment values. Liberal Enlightenment values, I might add. Okay? That's what's going on here. That's what David Wood is utterly unable to wrap his head around. The fact that Christianity really for 1700 years did not mind using the sword as a way of enforcing itself as a civilization. And ultimately, as a civilization, that's exactly what you require. It's exactly what it requires doing. Okay, and also Jamie wants to be on. So first of all, Jamie, as per the rules, I'm gonna let them read. I'm gonna let them go out. Hold on. These are the rules on the ticker, Jamie. Read the rules, and once the ticker's finished, I'll let you in. That's what everyone has to do. I want everyone to understand the rules of the studio before I let them in. So while that goes on, we'll play.
Like that. The only time you see that sort of thing arising is when it's combined with the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire didn't start as some Christian thing that arose out of Christianity. The Roman Empire was already there, and it had its own strategies for dealing with people. And it was you crush everything that gets in your way. And then you sort of end up with some Christians who want to crush everything that gets in their way. Not what Jesus said.
No, David, no one is crushing anybody. That's not what's going on here. If someone is crushed, it is only due as a natural consequence of what's going on. Like the Catholic Church, the Catholic Church doesn't want to crush anybody. We want to, or rather, how I put it, not the Catholic Church, but the Christian Church doesn't want to crush anybody. And until like 500 years ago, the church was essentially the Catholic Church with very few exceptions. We don't want to crush anybody. What we want to do is to preserve our culture and civilization from subversive peoples and identities that would ruin it. That's what's going on. The idea of crushing somebody is not what's on display here. Nothing like that is occurring. Nothing like that is happening. So David Wood is portraying church history in a way that is completely inaccurate, because again, he doesn't have any conception of church history outside of his liberalized evangelical fundamentalism. What say you, Jamie? How's it going, buddy?
Hey, good to see you, man. I think you probably know this, but it seems to me at least that David is saying he's thinking about the difference between Scripture and Islam and Scripture and Christianity, and he's thinking, the difference is here in Christianity is there's really no principle for the Christian to conduct that sort of behavior as far as, killing heretics and so that sort of thing. Well, historically, there are justifications for some of the actions of the greater church at large, in the medieval period or whatever.
Correct.
I actually agree with that. I mean, I have a little bit of a different take as far as some of the persecution, but some of it was justified. And I don't think David is necessarily trying to, I think he's just saying because he's a Protestant, particularly, he's saying Scripture, Jesus' teachings, when he says, here's the door sort of thing, it's like the worst thing it really ever says is like, hey, kick them out of the church and let Satan have his way with them sort of thing, hoping that, in the end they'll be saved by their spirit or, in the spirit or something, whatever that means.
Yeah. Now, here's the problem with that. And the main problem with that is that was Paul's teaching, and no doubt authoritative teaching to a point, but specifically in its historical context, this was in Paul's day. When Paul is referring how the church should govern herself, that is when the church is a minority and it is powerless. It is under the boot of Rome. Now,
indeed.
Exactly. Now the question is, how is a church to govern herself when she has the reins of power? This is something Paul never spoke about. And so what David is doing, and the danger of it, he's trying to look at the Scriptures as authoritative, right? But see that authority outside of the light of history that has gone forward. That's the issue.
Oh yeah. Well, what about one other thing I wanted to comment on that's kind of interesting historically would be before the church gains power through its largely through its overwhelming spread within that time period. It is interesting to note though that it was spreading with the pagan Roman Empire seeking to kill the Christians, and that actually flared up the spread of Christianity, I would argue, and to the point where it reached a tipping point where like they said, if you can't beat them, join them on some level. And now I mean that as an entity and not as an individual, anybody per se. And it seems to me there is a change, that I don't disagree with you. It's a different context once you have a majority and that are holding to those beliefs. But it is interesting that it spread in the way that it did through persecution. Actually, it seemed like it really flared it up. Would you disagree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. Persecution helped spread the church even further, and then there's a reason for this, because many groups were persecuted alongside Christians. It wasn't just Christians being persecuted. For instance, when Rome started to make her wars against the Sassanid Empire, what would happen is that religions that were transplanted from the Sassanids were likewise persecuted. For instance, the cult of Mithras. It was a religion that was growing as fast and quickly as Christianity. Yet once those wars started, you saw that religion get the boot even harder than Christianity did. And so Christianity wasn't the only religion being persecuted by Rome. But moreover, it is because of the foundational tenets of Christianity, because it gives people, it gives everyone, the slave and the emperor, an equal dignity before God. That, simply put, was never given to someone before this time. And so when you saw when the pagan peoples were seeing Christians die for this dignity, it simply made that dignity all the more appealing. And so what I would say, I would agree with you on that. But this idea of if you can't beat them, join them mentality, I would disagree on that. I think that Christianity, just due to the dignity it offered to humans in general, already had this level of allure to it, because it was a dignity that Rome could not offer you.
Do you have Constantine in mind when you say that? I have a position on that. I'm undecided as far as what his motivations necessarily.
Myself, I think how to put it. When you look at Constantine's history, because again, Constantine isn't the how to put it, the God of Christianity, of Jesus Christ and Yahweh. He's not the first God he appealed to. Throughout his reign, he tries to institute different cults. For instance, the cult of Sol Invictus, the cult of Apollo, and different other gods. And essentially what he's doing is that Constantine finds himself as the sole emperor of the whole empire. And so because you have this one emperor, which has essentially unlimited power, unlimited tangible power across the whole realm, it makes sense that there needs to be one God now kind of governing it, just as there is one emperor that governs it. And so, so what Constantine is doing, he is giving each god their chance of essentially a tryout to see, okay, which god proves itself worthy of Rome, all right, or which god is Rome worthy of serving. And so essentially, Apollo fails, Sol Invictus fails, many of the other gods fail. The one that succeeds, so the ones that he has the greatest victory in proclaiming, is Jesus Christ. Okay.
And he gives that in a dream, right? He talks about the dream he had. Now,
exactly.
That's plausible, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with you. Although, so you could take those facts and say, well, clearly he was simply trying to find a way to unite his his empire.
Exactly.
And he just put his finger to the wind, sort of thing. Or you could say he literally wasn't sure who the true God was, and he was trying them out. And then, sure enough, he had a dream about Christianity, and sure enough, when upholding it, he was victorious, and so he was truly converted by that. You could either argue that, or you could argue he's just putting his finger to the wind and then hoping whatever works. I'm not going to take a position. I'm undecided, but I could kind of see it either way.
And so the thing about it is, too, though, that Constantine was also in a very precarious position, because although Christianity was indeed a power to be reckoned with in his day, it nonetheless was only a fifth of the empire. Now, by the end of the 4th century, 1/5 of the empire would become 3/5. But in Constantine's day, To publicly profess Christianity was a very dangerous game to be playing, because he was still in the midst of a noble culture that was overwhelmingly pagan. And so Constantine never actually converted to Christianity, at least never during his reign. And so what he did, he made a Christianity a legal religion, as much of a legal religion as, say, Hellenism was, and even gave stolen property that Hellenism took from Christianity and gave it back to Christianity. Okay, but what's going on here? Hold on, Jamie. Let me finish. When he was baptized, right, was towards the end of his life. Now, this is notable because baptism is the beginning of your Christian walk, not the end of it. So, when Constantine was truly converted to Christianity, he did not feel like he could practice Christianity while he was emperor, and so he converted on his deathbed. Moreover, during his reign, actually, he mercilessly slaughtered his wife and his son because they were conspiring to take the seat of emperor from him. So in many ways, his station in life forced him to act more like a Hellenist than a Christian.
If I recall too, once he becomes emperor, he had taken part in persecuting, or maybe I'm thinking of another ruler at that time, contemporaneous or whatever, but it seems like he must have been in some ways being convinced that perhaps this religion's true or something, notably by the deathbed confession. I mean, was he doing what's that 50-50 proposition?
You're actually correct on this, Jamie, because when Constantine convenes the Council of Nicaea in 325, the bishops that take part in this council are within living memory of actual persecution, as the bishops that are attending this council, within their lifetimes, Christians were savagely persecuted. And so Constantine, likewise, just as they do, have living memory of a time where Christians were carrying the cause of Christ, carried a death sentence with it. So Constantine is aware that the religion he is proposing carried with it death, and not in a time not too far distantly related from him.
Yeah, it's kind of like when Donald Trump, stands up there and says, flashes the Bible around and says, 2 Corinthians is my favorite book, or whatever. You kind of think, I think he might be using that a little bit, right?
Obviously, yes. But now the issue is that with Constantine's case, I would argue he had a genuine love for Christ and Christianity, but politically he could not profess Christianity without putting his own power in jeopardy, and thus jeopardizing the whole sanctity of the empire.
Word. I mean, yeah. That's the same thing with Donald Trump, though, too. Like when it comes down to it, like when you're contemplating the message of Christ, or you're on your deathbed, or you're approaching that, I imagine Donald Trump would probably respond similarly. I don't know.
Yes, because on the course of dying, you have the concept of eternity to look forward to, and that'll humble the most arrogant of sinners, no doubt. Anyway, we're going to mute up and continue. Any closing thoughts for now, Jamie?
Nope.
Okay, let's continue.
Not what Jesus said. So, I mean, we can look back and try to understand them being in that situation. But
they didn't have that interpretation that you have. They're looking at the Old Testament. They're looking at Moses. They're looking at what Moses did. They're not looking at any. They weren't looking at any of that. That's what Theodosius cites. That's what he cites when he justifies killing the pagans and destroying their religious temples, destroying their idols. These are the things that they cite. They cite the Old Testament.
So you're saying Theodosius couldn't find anything from Jesus, and so he goes to the Old Covenant.
They looked at the entire Bible. They looked at the.
And if that, ladies and gentlemen, is not proof of how low David Wood looks at the Old Testament, I don't know what is. Thing about it is, again, this was pertinent. This was a pertinent part of my debate with Smoky Saint when I was debating the efficacy of the Inquisitions. Fact of the matter is the Torah part of the Bible or not? Is it authoritative and binding on the Christian, or isn't it? Because if it is, you logically have to come to an interpretation where secular authorities, or godly secular authorities, have the responsibility to protect Christianity, that you cannot walk away without that interpretation in some way, shape, or form. You're not going to do that. So David Wood is arrogantly criticizing Theodosius for correctly interpreting the Torah, because again, Theodosius isn't coming to the conclusion, well, you know what, it says to stone all idolaters, therefore, well, I guess we're going to have to commit ethnic cleansing on the Hellenists. That's not the conclusion he's coming to. The conclusion he is coming to is that there needs to be some sort of persecution of soft power, or like some show of force against clear heretics. That's what's going on here. So David Wood is arrogantly citing something, or arrogantly judging Theodosius for a correct understanding of the Torah, which David Wood, in no doubt at this point, does not see as authoritative in Christianity at all, and essentially is throwing half of Christianity and all of its ancient moorings under the bus. What are your thoughts on that one, Jamie?
I tend to agree with David, I guess, in the sense that I don't affirm the idea that Christians can get the idea of, killing heretics or whatever. I despise that, especially from the Protestant reformers, to be honest. And I think that verse about Caesar is actually a really good, like Jordan Peterson has said about that verse. It's a miracle in itself that verse would be said in the context of of Jesus saying it, in that it paves the way for the idea of separating the church from the state.
Oh yeah, Jamie, on no uncertain terms am I saying that the church should have the authority to put people to death. I'm not saying that. What I mean is that that secular governments have the obligation to protect Christian civilization, and at some times the death penalty is necessary to do that. Now, I think a level of mercy needs to be applied in all cases.
Okay.
Yeah, like again, as I said before, I'm very open to the idea, and I've been very clear that the death penalty shouldn't be used just right out of the gate. No.
Well, that's in the New Testament too. There's other places in the New Testament teaches this, where it says that's my understanding though, like God appointed the rulers and the authorities of the country, like that is, not the church. Isn't that in the New Testament? Yeah.
Correct. And so if God by his sovereign power is appointing pagan emperors and leaders to give security to the nation, how much more so should Christian secular authorities be expected then to protect their own civilizations? Because if Rome is willing to protect her own civilization with violence, why should Christian secular authorities not have the right to protect its own civilization and its own interests?
Oh yeah, for sure. That's a fact.
And so that's the thing. And that's what I brought up with my debate with Smokey. Ultimately, it comes down to this. Does Christianity as a civilization have a right to protect itself, or does it not? Because if it doesn't have a right to protect itself, if it should be as interchangeable as the clothes you wear, then Smokey Saint and David Wood are right on this issue, and I should just shut the hell up. They're right. I can't deny that. But if I'm right, if Christianity has the right to defend itself in some way, shape, or form, these are interpretations that you need to be open to.
Okay, now we're getting interesting here, because, and excuse me if I'm just not getting something here, but it seems the dispute for you here is like, okay, let me put it this way. When I look back in disdain upon the acts of Christians when they had power, I think of parts of the Inquisitions, and I think of parts of especially like the Calvinists and John Calvin in particular. And I think now when they're killing heretics from a doctrinal standpoint, is that really secular power executing force against heretics? I mean, it's one thing if it's like encroaching Islamic terror or something, and it's another thing if it's like established sects of Christianity disagreeing with each other. what do you think about that distinction? If you understood what I was saying.
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because that's actually something that is, I think I have the book here. Yeah, here it is. In the Spanish Inquisition, a historical revision by Dr. Henry Kamen, he actually illustrates how an ecclesiastical inquisition court would be set up. And essentially what would happen is that the defendant would come across the ecclesiastical court, and he was there to determine whether or not the defendant was guilty of heresy. And if the defendant was guilty of heresy, the church would hand over the defendant to the secular authorities. They give the secular authorities their ruling, and the secular authorities would decide what to be done, whether it would be death sentence, life sentence, who knows, just like a stint in jail, or even it could, again, because the punishments of the Inquisition could range anywhere from a simple flogging, community service, to death, right? And so the ecclesiastical courts were only coming to a decision on whether or not this person is guilty of heresy, okay? And then you would be handed over to the secular authorities, and the secular authorities would decide how to punish you. So the actual punishment given to defendants was to be carried out by secular authorities. The ecclesiastical authorities just decided whether or not you were guilty. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, that sounds a lot like how they killed Jesus.
Right, because here's the issue. The Catholic Church, much of its institutions, the magisterium, the cardinal, the College of Bishops, much of this is taken from Jewish understandings of rulers, of rulership. That's where it comes from. If for that, I would actually suggest Swansona, Suansonna. Swansona actually has published some papers arguing that Jesus is setting up a new Sanhedrin through apostolic succession, and so how the Jews acted towards Jesus, and how the Jews interacted with secular authority, seen in the Roman Empire, is kind of repeated again. How the Catholic Church is operating towards its own secular authority, which we found in medieval monarchalism.
Well, that seems to me that the structure of what got Jesus executed is, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. It would be the reasoning or the let's say the immoral way it was executed, in a certain sense, I guess. I mean, that's an interesting question, really. If Jesus hadn't been who he was, would it have been wrong for them to go at him as they did, let's say? And if it is true that it wasn't wrong if he hadn't been who he was, then that's an interesting thing to be considered. Now, this is where it gets interesting with I don't want to say there's no grounds for, let's say, a Catholic, inquisition against heretics, because I mean there is a point to where you have to, like, the love of Christianity, or the love that Christ, taught, or whatever, and the practicality of it in the world on a national level or something, or heretics can mess up stuff pretty bad. People don't
Definitely.
It's easy to condemn killing them. So I don't want to totally just poo-poo the idea that we should never kill a heretic in any circumstance ever. Otherwise, like you said, the Torah would be immoral, and I don't think it was. It was necessary, and that brings up the whole thing about what was necessary to bring forth the Messiah to and is that still applicable today? I would argue no, on some level, whether it be because of modern, not just modern sensibilities, but modern conveniences and just technology. So yeah, I mean, is it really separation of church and state if the church is trying these people to be executed by the state? It kind of seems like a mingling, maybe a little too much of a mingling. But like I said, I'm not totally sure on that.
Well, and I was kind of with you on this for a while, but what I came to realize is that the separation of church and state is almost as old as Christianity itself. It's just how the church is to be separated. You see, the fact of the matter is, we believe that the church and state are in fact distinct bodies, but they run parallel together to achieve a common good. Okay, and so a society without heresy is a common good, both for the secular world and for the ecclesiastical one. Therefore, the church does in fact have a right to try crimes that are committed in its arena, and the secular courts have the secular courts have a monopoly on force, and therefore, the carrying out punishments is something that should be that is relegated to the secular. That's how it has been understood essentially since the reign of Justinian.
But so like let's say in the American case, like the laws of the land, the secular law, let's say, would not ever condone the killing over heresy. So how would that even work, right? And then if you make laws that are applicable to allow such a thing, is that not opening the door for the state to embrace the church?
And well, and that's the issue. No, I'm not. I don't object to the state embracing the church. I don't object to a state religion. What I object to is a theocracy. Okay, and so what's going on is that how do I put it? The understanding of secularism today comes largely from liberalism and liberal values, not from inherent Christian ones.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right. Let's mute up and continue.
Entire Bible, and they said, look, we have Moses doing this. Jesus said that he is a follower of Moses and that he respects him. Did Jesus denounce Moses? Did Jesus say that Moses was an evil man? No, he endorses Moses.
What's the quote from Theodosius? I'd be interested in seeing the reasoning, but notice it would be very, very strange of me to say, hey, here's what I'm commanded. Jesus commanded me to love everyone, even my enemies. I'm told to live in peace with all men. I'm told to seek the good of all people. I'm told to pray for all people. I'm told to honor all people. But, Moses fought the Canaanites, so therefore I'm going to go slaughter unbelievers in the name of Jesus. You really not understand how strange that is? I have commands that are directed towards me.
Commands that are directed to Moses? Or I missed
No. I said there are commands that are directed towards Christians, right? Jesus saying that that we have to love everyone, including our enemies. That's directed towards
how is that
the people of his
policy
covenant.
That a Christian state can take?
You're talking about.
I love my enemy. I love the enemies that are approaching my city and are about to commit genocide.
Jesus doesn't tell us.
And here again, once more, Haqiqatjou understands something that David Wood doesn't, just abundantly doesn't. And unfortunately, Jamie left, so I wonder if he's going to be back on. Oh, hold on. Something. I have to go, but I will be listening on my phone. Sorry, I have to leave suddenly. Good stuff, bro. Well, thank you for your time, Jamie. Anyway, so moving on. Once again, Daniel Haqiqatjou just knocks it out of the freaking park. Absolutely. Fact of the matter is, here's what's going on. What David understands as love is something that is milquetoast and harmless. That's not what love is. Love is an action. It is an action you decide to take upon yourself every day. It is a force of will. You will yourself to love another. For instance, like, again, this understanding of love at first sight is absolutely insane. No, what's going on is that love is an emotion. Love is an action. You will yourself to love another, and there is nothing more loving than protecting a Christian from the fires of hell. There's nothing more loving than that. And so when you have... Oh, I know you're still there, Jamie. I didn't think for a moment you would leave me. So when you have Christians, or rather Christian heretics, that are that have huge followings, all those followers that are followers of that heretical cult are sending people to hell. Okay? Now, that the only way they can avoid that hell is by virtue of their ignorance. Okay? But heresy corrupts. And when you believe in false things about the Christian faith, it easily can translate to idolatry. Easily. It can easily make yourself written out of the book of life. And this is important because there is nothing more loving than defending Christian civilization, than defending the church, than defending those things that naturally protect the sanctity of innocent souls. And so you can love your enemy, absolutely. You can love your enemy and also slaughter your enemy. There is no contradiction there, because to love your enemy means, yes, you have to love your enemy. You have to go out of your way to serve your enemy. But it doesn't mean that you allow your enemy to damn innocent souls. It does not translate to that. Oh, by the way, Jamie did me a solid. Okay. I shared to some peeps. Thank you very much, Jamie. Don't forget to tell them all to like and subscribe. Anyway, so again, Haqiqatjou is right here. There is a reason that Justinian and many Christian secularists throughout the centuries and millennia appeal to the Torah, because it has within the Torah commands from Yahweh himself about how to secure Christian civilization. And he's right. Going the way that David Wood understands Christianity, there's no way that Christianity could have survived. Christianity survived by the use of violence, because using force in some way is always going to be a good when establishing the sanctity of the state. Or did I say the state? Sorry, of the church. Because the state will come, it will go. Christian nations have come, they were born, they had their time in their sun, they left this war behind. But the church for 2,000 years remains the same. It remains here and remains constant. And it has remained so because secular authorities, as well as religious ones, have shed blood and ink over its protection. What David Wood doesn't seem to realize, because I think as far as David Wood goes, and especially as Smokey Saint goes, because I had a debate with him regarding an issue tangential to this, or parallel to this, the very same culture motivating factors that launched the Crusades into action are the same cultural factors that made inquisitors burn heretics at the stake. Those are the same motivating factors at play. And these factors at play are the understanding that Christianity is a civilization and it has a right to defend itself. If David Wood's understanding of Christianity ruled out in Christ's time, there would be no Christianity today. It would just be another paganized offshoot of Hellenism, and emphasis on the hell of that, because it is just the same religion that completely took away, or that would refuse to give humanity the dignity that God demands it has. That's what would have happened. And there's no way of walking that back. It's abundantly clear from the earliest days after Christ. It was understood that Christianity was something that the secular authorities had a right to enforce. It was just understood. It's not until just very recently, like 18th century kind of recently, where these ideas were challenged. So it's literally David Wood, not just versus the world, but David Wood versus every world Christianity has found itself in. 19 centuries were 20 centuries worth of worlds. Okay? Scott Pilgrim had it easy.
State. You can't talk to a state. Jesus isn't talking to a state.
So
he's
then
talking to
a Christian
he's talking
civilization
to his followers.
can't exist. The Christian nation cannot exist. America. Many people consider America a Christian nation. And if an invading force comes, the Christians are all supposed to lie down and lay down their weapons, because Jesus said, don't you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I live in Texas. I think the Texans over here are not going to be very happy about this kind of interpretation that you are imposing on Jesus and saying that this is his message for a Christian nation. Actually, there is no Christian nation. There is no guidance on that level. That doesn't really make sense.
You can
to
have
me.
a
I don't think
nation-
it makes sense to many Christians. Let me cite you Theodosian. In the Theodosian decree, it is decreed that in all places and all cities, the pagan temple should be closed at once, and after a general warning, the opportunity of sinning be taken from the wicked. We decree also that we shall cease from making sacrifices, and anyone who has committed such a crime, let him be stricken with the avenging sword. And we decree that the property of the one executed shall be claimed by the city, and that rulers of the provinces be punished in the same way if they neglect to punish such crimes. Codex Theodosianus, and the citation.
No, my question.
And that is exactly what I mean. Fact of the matter is, it isn't just that Christian emperors are doing this that David Wood has to contend with. It is the fact that there's not a single voice of opposition against this decree. Not a single voice of opposition. In Theodosius's time, in Justinian's time, and Constantine's time, and in Martin Luther's time even, where his religion kind of gets its seedbed from, there's not a single Christian that would have objected to what Theodosius did, or what Constantine did, or what Justinian did. Not a single one. And that's what I mean. David Wood, due to his assumptions of liberalism and Enlightenment philosophies taking preeminence over a Christian worldview, what goes on is that ultimately, at the end of the day, David Wood is completely unable to make a thorough refutation of these principles. His Christianity is utterly incompatible with the ages that came before it. Hey, Jamie's saying something here. Let's see it. I think America is mostly thinking of Christian sects and the differences when separating church and state, no other religions. It's interesting you say that, Jamie, because there's a good argument to be made that when the Constitution was talking about there shall be no that Congress shall make no law a kind of appeasing to religion, that word religion in mind, they had the term Christianity in mind. No other religion was to be practiced. There's an interpretation of the Constitution kind of with that how I'll put it. In its time and place, the term religion meant different Christianities. It didn't mean Christianity as opposed to, say, Islam and Buddhism and Shintoism and Hinduism, not the multi-religious multiculturalism we know today. So it's very interesting you bring that up. Thank you. Moving on.
Was where does he say he's getting this from Moses?
Where is he getting it from? I mean, he's basing it on the Bible in general.
Yeah, where's he? Well, what I'm saying is what he just said, that sounds exactly like what a Roman emperor would say. It just got combined with Christianity. In other words, that's a.
I mean, this policy from Theodosius and other emperors actually makes more rational sense, because it seems like they're trying to expand and grow the Christian nation. They're trying to preserve Christians from, falling into worshiping false idols. That seems like a reasonable policy, actually. What you're saying seems like the destruction of Christianity and making sure that Christians can't even exist past the first century.
Think about what you're saying, because I think things make sense in your head, but they're totally contradicted by reality. Christians were persecuted for centuries without shedding a drop of blood, and they ended up taking over the Roman Empire, right? According to you,
how did they take?
All right, yeah, they ended up taking over the Roman Empire, David. What did they do after that, Dr. Wood? Enlighten us. When Christianity takes over the Roman Empire and we have the reins and power, what exactly is the next step? What do we do then? Because Paul never talked about that. In Paul's day, Christianity was, as I keep saying, it was a minority of minorities. So what do you do when Christianity is now dominant? What do you do when it gains dominion? What do you do, Dr. Wood? What do you do? Now, you see, I can answer this question. When you gain dominion and you gain power, you use that power to protect Christian civilization, and you protect Christian civilization by utilizing force. This is what Daniel Haqiqatjou is clearly aware of. That's what he's doing. That's what he's appealing to. Fact of the matter is, Dr. Wood, you have absolutely no understanding of how to refute Haqiqatjou on this issue, because Haqiqatjou is appealing to some of the most authoritative interpretations of Christianity that there is. And so what is going on here is Wood is absolutely unable to do anything about it. The best way his best response is my liberalism and my evangelicalism and my peace and love and my milquetoast understanding of Christian morality and ethics. That's all he's able to do. Let's see. There were no major divisions except Gnosticism in Paul's day, but Scripture didn't call them sects, which was where the word heretic comes from. Actually, no, Gnosticism was not in Paul's day. Now, that would come after Paul and very early on in church history, but Paul did not have to deal with Gnostics at that point. But you're right all the same, Jamie. But Scripture did not call them sects, which is where the word heretic comes from. Correct, because the understanding of heresy is that which runs contrary to orthodox opinion. So when you do not have the right opinions of Christianity, you have the wrong ones. That's what the word heresy means. I would agree with you on that, if that's what you're trying to say. Moving on. Mute up.
Take over that. How did they take over?
Not by killing. Not by killing. They didn't take over the Roman Empire by killing. People just kept converting to Christianity. So that's what I'm pointing out. The problem.
So these converts that apparently know.
Oh yes. Oh yes. We took over the empire with peace and love. Absolutely, absolutely. Because I just have it on good authority that through the peace and love of the 60s and the power of marijuana, that we just smoked our way into just better peace and love of understanding of the world. And we just loved and hugged the Roman Empire to death, and we conquered it that way. Absolutely, Dr. Wood. Because that's how it works. Okay, yes. Yeah, it's not that, Jesus said, it's not that Revelation doesn't say a sword is going to come from Christ's mouth or anything. It's not that he says Christ is going to come back with a rod of iron. It's not that there are clear commandments, ethical commandments in the Torah that dictate secular authorities have a right to defend orthodoxy. No, none of that exists. We were just able to bypass all that with the power of peace, love, and the good old sweet MJ. Absolutely. Good job, Dr. Wood. I applaud you on that. Yes. Now, comedy aside, we're going to continue.
So much about peace and not killing, they immediately start killing. Constantine immediately starts killing after he converts.
Keep in mind Constantine got this dream: conquer by this. Now Christianity is something you conquer for.
So that was a false dream.
He has to. I don't know. I mean, it could be a true dream, and he just misinterpreted it. I mean, yeah, I could say, I'm supposed to conquer by the cross. It's not that I'm going out and hacking people up over it. But I mean, it's very simple. If you're going around killing heretics, killing apostates, and so on, it's very simple. You've got the commands that are directed towards Christians as the covenant that we're under, and it's simple. Jesus said.
And this is the thing that Dr. Wood does not want to address. The fact of the matter is, it is more than just the fact. Here's the thing: in the old covenant, yes, idolaters, false prophets, the whole they had to legally be put to death. However, adulterers, homosexuals, Sabbath breakers, they equally had to die by God's law. What changed, Dr. Wood? Well, what changed was the passion of the Christ. What changed is that now there is a new covenant under the law of grace. And that is why when the church goes out of her way to persecute heretics and idolaters, we don't just hack them up with a sword. oftentimes there we use soft power against them. In the same way that Paul says that among you used to be whoremongers, idolaters, murderers, defilers of yourselves with mankind. It was what's for some of you, but now you have been cleansed and sanctified in the blood of Christ. Now, does Paul say, well, because you've done these things, you might be sanctified, but you need to be killed anyway? No, Paul doesn't say that, because now under Christ, there is a standard of mercy that we have before God, okay? And that standard of mercy, you even see applied in Christian secular governments when they're going out of their way to persecute heretics. Again, when Augustine wants the emperor to persecute the theological heretics in his diocese, he doesn't do it with the intent, go slaughter them with the sword. No. He does it with the understanding that peaceful resolutions have been, that peaceful solutions have been exerted, that his peaceful resolutions have been completely used up. Now it's time for the sword. That's where Augustine is going. In fact, the same way you see that with the Inquisitions, with Justinians. In fact, when Haqiqatjou was reading out Theodosius, if you were caught, if there was a practicing temple found where it should not have been, they were given a warning first that stop this immediately. And if they didn't, now you come after them with the sword. In the Spanish Inquisition, the seal of the Spanish Inquisition was a Christian cross in the center. On one side, you saw the olive branch, and on the other side, you saw the sword. What was going on is that the Inquisition would first offer the olive branch. They would offer any heretic or any idolater, anybody guilty of beliefs that subverted Christian civilization. They offered them the ability to be able to offer themselves up before meeting more stiffer penalties. And if you didn't, well, now you have the sword to look forward to. You have the force of the state by which you are going to be subject to. This is the law of Christ at work, David. I know you don't like it. I know it very much conflicts and contradicts your secular liberalism, but God doesn't care. And neither did the church for over 17 centuries. And even today in the 21st century, the church still identifies liberalism as a sin. And the fact that this does not even bother you is alarming in your understanding of church history, in your understanding of even Christianity in its historical context. It's sad, really.
You shall love your neighbor, and you've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. Is that consistent with going around slaughtering people over Jesus because they're following the wrong thing?
Yes, the answer is yes. Here, Jamie said it for me. Yes, not in the same context, but I'm using his yes as my yes. So what's going on here is that initially, yes, the olive branch is to be given. If you reject the olive branch, you will not be able to reject the sword. That's what's going on. And as established before, there's nothing more loving than saving your fellow brothers and sisters in Christ from the fires of hell. There is nothing more loving than that. Nothing more loving. So, capital punishment of the judicious killing of false converts, of heretics, of idolaters, is not necessarily an evil. It becomes an evil where no mercy is extended to them. They're just slaughtered immediately. That is where the evil comes in, because under the new covenant, a standard of mercy and grace is to be given. You can see this, as I saw it already. You can see this kind of like illustrated by Theodosius and Justinian, and later on in the Inquisitions of the medieval Christian nations. There's no contradiction here, except the only contradiction is the one David Wood wants to invent. That's it. Moving on.
When Jesus was before Pilate and he said, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to my Jewish enemies. As it is, my kingdom is not of this world. So if he's saying his kingdom is not of this world, and you say we have to go out and establish this kingdom for Jesus, you got issues. And when Paul says, let all that you do be done in love, when he says that Christians are to walk in love, when he says, may the Lord cause you to increase and abound in love for one another and for all people. When he says, I urge that entreaties and prayers, petitions and thanksgivings be made on behalf of all men. When the author of Hebrews says that we have to pursue peace with all men. When Peter says that we have to honor all people. It's just not consistent with going on a killing spree. Again, you keep trying to apply that to some Christian state. These are you could have a state that punishes wrongdoers and so on. This is talking about individual Christians and how we're supposed to live and how the church is supposed to function in society.
How can the church function if it's not like an organized body that has the ability to coerce? You know, because excommunication is actually, you say it like, oh, just there's the door, walk out of it. That essentially means that you're banned from society, which is condemning people to either death or a life of complete destitution and ruin. So that is actually coercion. Excommunication isn't some, benign thing that you keep referring to.
In the first century, Christians are a persecuted minority. So they get out of the church.
We're not talking about the first century, David. We're not talking about the first century, because there are 19 that follow that. What do you do outside the first century? How did Christianity as a religion even survive with people like you at the helm? Simply put, it couldn't. It just couldn't. David Wood, the only way that David Wood's interpretation of Christianity makes sense is if you assume there was authentic Christianity in the first century, and then there was a semblance of authentic Christianity basically until either the 16th or the 18th century. There's no other interpretation. There's no other way you can square that circle. It doesn't work that way. It's either Christianity is able to use force to defend itself, or it's not. Which is it, David? You can't have your cake and eat it too here. Either you take Christianity as a religion, or you face the very real possibility of immediate cultural extermination. Because if Christianity does not have the wherewithal, have the ability, have the mechanisms in place by which it can defend itself, what you have is nothing more than a slow suicide pact to whatever culture happens to find itself in the region that you are a Christian in at whatever time and place in history. How are you defending this, David? And moreover, how are you defending it so poorly, moreover? It's like, I don't even know how to. I'm done. I'm just done. At this point, I am tempted to just say, okay, Haqiqatjou won the whole debate. We will do nothing more here. Kind of like beating a dead horse. In a sense, I feel like that's what I'm doing. But maybe different. Maybe something else is going to happen here. That's really just going to make David Wood's position appear less suicidal. Let's find out.
Church that most of the world is open to.
No, I'm talking about the majority of Christian history. You are cherry picking these kinds of examples. You reference excommunication, so I'm telling you the reality of what that has been historically. Like, look, Augustine is citing the Old Testament when he justifies persecuting heretics. So let me read.
So notice you would have to go to the Old Testament, right? You
can't the Bible. Christians believe in the Bible. Christians actually take their guidance from the entirety of the Bible. No one has this interpretation that you have, that everything in the Old Testament is irrelevant. Don't even look at it. No one has interpretation.
Never said that.
Even Christians.
But that is the conclusion you come to listening to what you say, David, when you are, because here's the thing, the Bible, beyond a shadow of a doubt, gives ethical commands for secular authorities to protect Christianity. You can't get away from that. And guess what, David? Secular authorities have the right to use force. They have a monopoly on force. So what Yahweh himself is saying is that your kings, your magistrates, they have the authority to enforce orthodox religion. Haqiqatjou is being more consistent in his understanding of Christianity than you are in your practice of it. There's no way of reconciling the two. Like, Haqiqatjou won this debate hands down. There's no way that you can come away from this debate this far in and think that it isn't an absolute slaughter for Dr. Wood's position. There's no way. Not unless you're lying to yourself. Let's move on.
To say that the new covenant abrogates the old covenant and the Mosaic law, they still took inspiration from the Bible. They still cite the Bible. This is the first time I'm hearing a Christian. Every time I cite something from the Old Testament, this is Augustine. You're trying to overtalk Augustine in your interpretation of Augustine, usage of the Old Testament.
If Augustine throws out the words of Jesus for another covenant, he's got issues. Just let me give you an example, because I don't think.
But, Doctor, do you not understand that during the lifetime of Christ, while he's establishing his covenant, he says emphatically he has not come to overturn the Mosaic covenant, but rather to fulfill it. That means the ethical, moral obligations found in the Mosaic covenant still apply today. And guess what, David Wood, or Dr. Wood? One of the ethical and moral commands of the Old Covenant is emphatically to enforce orthodoxy. You can't get away from this no matter how hard you try. Jesus, by saying that, hey, listen, Moses came here. Moses established a covenant. I'm not here to get away with it. I can't get away from that. I am here to fulfill that. What do you do with that? Because if you're going to try to appeal to Jesus, Jesus agrees with the Muslim here. How does it feel, David, that your God, Jesus Christ himself, right, identifies more with the Muslim apostate heretic than he does with you? Okay, hold on. And Saturday is Sabbath. Good question, Jamie. This is what I mean. You still have a moral obligation to keep the Sabbath. That's why tomorrow I'm going to be at Mass, because that's my Sabbath. Because here's the thing. Circumcision is still alive and well in the Catholic Church. We just call it baptism because circumcision has been fulfilled with baptism. The fasts that we're seeing throughout the Old Testaments and the rabbinic Judaism are still in effect today. We just have it fulfilled in the Friday fasts and Lent. Okay? There are still valid fasts to be done, to be practiced within Christianity. It's just that within the covenant of Jesus Christ, these things are fulfilled. So, what Jesus is saying, that he's not saying that there isn't going to be a Sabbath where the old covenant would not be valid. He's saying that for it to be fulfilled, since he's coming to fulfill the covenant, the new Sabbath is on Sunday. Okay? So you make a good point, Jamie. This is what I mean. Whereas the ethical commandments of the Torah are still in observance, just fulfilled through Christ. So with that, we'll continue.
Think this is terribly difficult, but the Bible contains a series of covenants. So there's a covenant between God and Adam. God says, Adam, you do this, and here's what I'm going to do. There's a covenant with Noah. Matter of fact, I'll even give you a specific example. God gives a covenant with Noah, establishes a covenant with Noah. And as part of that covenant, there are no eating restrictions. He says, eat anything that moves, anything you want to kill and eat. Later on, there's a covenant with the children of Israel, and you can read the Torah over and over again. These are the rules for the children of Israel. These are the rules for the children of Israel. And under that covenant, you have all these dietary restrictions. You didn't have those under the covenant with Noah. It's a different covenant. You're talking about different covenants. But also in the Old Testament, we're told a new covenant is coming. And so the new covenant is coming, and then we have the rules that are associated with the new covenant. It would just make no sense. And you can even see this. This is, in other words, this is in the New Testament where the issue comes before the apostles in Acts 15. And it's, hey, which of these rules that are for the children of Israel actually apply to non-Jewish Christians? And they only come up with a couple of things that would have interfered with the fellowship between Gentile Christians and Jewish Christians. It was, hey, don't eat certain things in the presence of Jewish believers because that's going to cause division. But it never crosses their mind, oh, we have to follow all these things. All these new Christians have to follow all of these.
You're strawmanning. I didn't.
Yeah, Jamie, that's not good for your teeth. I don't think garbage and broken glass is good for dinner. Okay, ew. Anyway, so what is David Wood going to do with the passage in Corinthians where Paul is actively telling believers to stay away from meat sacrificed to idols because he does not want his believers, his people, to be associated with demons? Because with food that is sacrificed to demons, you become partakers in demonic sacrifice. And Paul says, I would not want you to be partakers of demons. So what are you going to do about that one, Dr. Wood? Because when Paul is speaking, he's abundantly clear that there is still some dietary restrictions in place, right? The only dietary laws that are, how should I say this? Yeah, the only dietary laws that are preached against are Jewish ones. What are you going to do with that? Like, what are you going to do? All right, and Jamie put a citation verse here, 1 Corinthians 7:19. I have a Bible in front of me, so I'll read you with it. Where does 19? Okay. Right, so let's read this in context, Jamie. Let's start with 12 to really put it in context. To the rest of the day, not the Lord, that if any brother has to the rest I say, not the Lord, that if any brother has a wife who is an unbeliever, and she consents to live with him, he should not divorce her. If any woman has a husband who is an unbeliever, and he consents to live with her, she should not divorce him, for the unbelieving husband is consecrated through his wife, and the unbelieving wife is consecrated through her husband. Otherwise, your children would be unclean, but as it is, they are holy. But if the unbelieving partner desires to separate, let it be so. In such a case, brother or sister is not bound, for God has called us to peace. Wife, how do you know whether you will save your husband? Husband, how do you know whether you will save your wife? Only let one lead the life which the Lord has assigned him, and in which God has called him. This is my rule in all the churches. What has anyone at the time of his call already? Was anyone at the time of his call already circumcised? Let him not seek to remove the marks of his circumcision. This is a reference to Jewish believers that were circumcised already and converted to the faith. Okay? All right, now, was anyone at the time of his call uncircumcised? Let him not seek circumcision. Why? Because circumcision, then baptism is the new circumcision. Okay? In the old covenant, circumcision was how you joined the old covenant. That's why circumcised Jews, when they join the new covenant, that's why you don't remove the marks of your circumcision, because you've achieved the new circumcision already. The old circumcision has no bearing. But those that are uncircumcised, don't let them be circumcised, because they are how would I put it? They are bowing to the covenants of the old law that have been fulfilled with Jesus Christ. Baptism is the new circumcision, and 1 Corinthians 7 is one of the evidences I would use to cement that. And also, Jamie, I have no idea what this is. Do you mean to try to spell charism there? Okay. All right. Diego, I was watching pretty unsettling video of a channel called The Fortress, and it talked about the execution of St. Thomas More, and some people in the comment section started to say he tortured people. No, he did not. He did not. Thomas More in life was merely a prosecutor, okay? He was a secular prosecutor working under King Henry the 12th, I believe. I think his name was Henry the 12th. His job was merely to prosecute people for crimes he thought they had committed, and his job was only to prove in a court of law that these people had committed crimes. Oftentimes, these crimes were heresy. Whatever punishment was given was handed out by the king himself or rightly installed officials. His only job was that of a prosecutor, to see whether or not someone was innocent or guilty. That's it. Now, and specifically innocent or guilty by law, whatever injustice happened after his whatever injustice happened outside of the courtroom is outside of his control. His job is merely to find out whether or not someone is guilty by law. That's it. Full stop. Whatever happens after that is not his guilt to share. Let's move on.
Say that Christians believe that you have to follow everything in the Old Testament and the Mosaic Law. You're strawmanning me. I'm
If
saying
you're going
that
to follow it on
Christians-
big
I'm saying
things
these
like going
Christians-
around killing people,
Yeah,
that
they
would be
did.
kind of
They
a
did
big
take
one.
that. Yeah, they did take that. They
Who did?
did take that from the Old Testament.
Did Paul?
Augustine is
We're not
citing
talking about
it.
Augustine here.
Theodosius is citing it. Constantine is citing it. All of these other Christians throughout history are citing the Old Testament to justify expansionist war, because they are looking for, as Christians, guidance on how to run their state. They're trying to run society according to Christian values. You have this preposterous position that the Bible has nothing applicable to running a state. And I agree.
You talk about me. You talk about me strawmanning. I talked about how the church would influence governments and so on. But yes, if you're talking about the church,
based on what teaching of Jesus,
going out and
based
conquering,
on what teaching of Jesus did they influence that?
His kingdom is not of this world. What's that?
I was going to say, just to hear the rest from David.
What's
Well,
that?
he cut me off, so
Oh yeah, no, you can. No,
I agree.
it's friendly.
It's like roughly equal. This is where I'm like, just to be sure that it keeps going in a civil manner, I'm jumping in a little bit more now. So I'm not trying to say anybody.
Oh, that's fine. And by the way, Daniel, you're free to cut me off. I have no problems. It's a friendly discussion. But Jesus says his kingdom is not of this world. He establishes the church. You could have a nation of Christians. You could even have a nation grounded in Christian principles and so on. You can do all that. That's just, you're kind of on new ground, because that's not what you're commanded. And Christians for the first 3 centuries of Christianity don't seem to have a concept that they're supposed to be out there taking over the world. The time.
Again, this is not what's going. Actually, no, I did not skip verse 19, Jamie. I'm going to get over. Yeah, hold on. I did not skip verse 19. I'm going to get on that, just not now. Let me finish. David Wood said something very, very eloquent here. Fact of the matter is, again, it's not that Christianity has a right to dominate the world. It's that Christianity came into the world from a place of powerlessness. Then it gained the reins of power. Now what do? You see, David Wood does not have the foresight. He doesn't have the revelations of sacred tradition and the magisterium to appeal to. You see, because the church understands that God's revelation to his people comes in 3 forms: Holy Scripture that was given, divine sacred tradition that comes directly from the apostles, and the third One is the rulings of the church's magisterium. Through these three sources of revelation, we can make decisions of what Christianity does and how it interacts with the world into each world it comes into. Okay? At the end of the 4th century, Christianity gained dominion. What do we now do with this dominion? And we used sacred tradition, we used scripture, and we used church rulings as a way of answering this. David Wood only has scripture. He only has scripture. And the problem with scripture is that it's finite. It has a 73 book limit, or 66 book limit in David Wood's case. And those 66 books only cover a very finite, segmented period of time. Okay? As infallible as God's word is, and as timeless as it is, there are certain aspects of human history that it cannot touch, that it cannot address, because it didn't have to during those times. For instance, Moses Moses definitely was not pro-life. The reason is because the idea that life starts at conception, he had no idea of. Now he knew life started within the womb of the woman, but at what point? He didn't know. He genuinely didn't know. He had no conception that a sperm germinates a woman's egg, and that egg and sperm turn into an embryo. That embryo is a human person. It basically attaches itself to a woman's the wall of a woman's uterus, and grows into a zygote, and then a fetus. That fetus grows into a baby, and that baby is eventually born. Moses didn't have such interpretations of embryology the way we understand them today. So Moses wasn't a pro-life position because embryology, as he understood it today, he had no conception of. Now, how do you kind of square the circle? Well, that's where you appeal to the two other forms of revelation: sacred tradition that was inherited by the apostles, and the church's rulings in light of history as it experiences it. And that's why we know that when that life begins at conception, it is one of God's commandments, because the church has ruled on it so. It has used its infallible faculties to come to such a conclusion. Okay, so Diego said something here. What you got to say, Diego? It's because they said he tortured people called heretics that Henry the Seventh, it was the 7th, okay, did the right thing, and a specific comment said that the Reformation was the best and that the Reformers made the world. That's a very Protestant assumption, I'm not going to lie. I thoroughly expect a Protestant liberal to say something like that. Anyway, okay, they said he tortured people who was called heretic. Again, he didn't torture people. He might have demonstrated their guilt by law. Any point after that is beyond his control. Henry did the right thing in a specific... Wait, so you mean Henry did the right thing by executing a man that disagreed with his adulterous affairs? Well, okay, I'm glad that the documentary that you're citing there... I'm glad that channel you're citing there, Diego, we now have a proper understanding of its lack of moral integrity. Okay. Now... let's address your verse 19, Jamie. All right. Was anyone at the time of his call already circumcised? We're reading from Corinthians 1:18, by the way. Let him not seek to remove the marks of circumcision. Was any one who at the time of his call uncircumcised? Let him not seek circumcision, for neither circumcision counts for anything, nor uncircumcision, but keeping the commandments of God. Correct, because circumcision itself has been fulfilled with baptism. Moreover, the commandments of God are the commandments of God that we have. Like, what's said after that? Everyone should remain in a state. Okay, everyone should remain in the state which he was called. Were you a slave when called? Never mind. But if you gain your freedom, avail yourself the opportunity, for he who was called in the Lord as a slave is a freedman of the Lord. Likewise, he who was a freedman when he is a slave of Christ. You were bought with a price. Do not become slaves of men. So, brethren, in whatever state each was called, let him remain with God. What Paul is saying is that the commandments of God are important. They are binding on the Christian even today. That's why circumcision is a big no-no. You cannot be circumcised as a Christian, or Christianity does not require circumcision, because the commandments of God has deemed it that baptism is now the new circumcision. That is the commandment of God. Let's continue. Oh, what happened? Hold on, technical difficulties again, ladies and gentlemen. There we go, they're fixed. Let's mute up and go.
When you start to get ideas like that is after Christianity is combined with the Roman Empire, and then you've got this Christian-Roman hybrid, and then of course people within that empire start coming up with, here's why we have to do it. Well, the only point here, there's nothing in your covenant that suggests that. So yeah, I don't.
Are you actually circumcised, Jamie? If you're actually circumcised, it's very interesting. And again, I'd imagine your parents did that, so you don't have control over that. That guilt would not be on you then. Okay, so let's kind of replay that last 20 seconds there.
We empire, and then you've got this Christian-Roman hybrid, and then of course people within that empire start coming up with, here's why we have to do it. Well,
and ladies and gentlemen, if that does not articulate just the amount of lack of education that David Wood has on this topic, if that doesn't illustrate it, I don't know what does, because no serious scholar will say that after 300 you had this Roman Christian hybrid. Absolutely not. All you have to do is simply research how Hellenism was enacted by Rome. All you have to do is understand how Hellenism was understood by Rome, and then compare that to how Christianity was practiced. The two cultures are night and day, ladies and gentlemen. You can't confuse the two. When Dr. Wood says that Christianity became basically just this Roman Christian hybrid after Constantine, this is a smear and slander. There's no polite way of putting it. It just is. No person educated on this issue or topic would say something so ridiculous. Okay? Just in everywhere from the little to the big things, and the way economies were structured, and the way of the sexual unions between men and women, and the value that slaves were given, in very, very fundamental things that we take for granted today, Rome had no conception of. They were a barbaric society, and once Constantine converts to Christianity, once Christianity gains dominion in the Roman Empire, you see incredible amounts of, how would I put it? Incredible amounts of tolerance and decency given to people that otherwise would not have the expectation. So David Wood saying that Christianity was kind of hybridized with Rome is an uneducated and bigoted thing for him to say. But I think he was illustrating both quite eloquently throughout this whole encounter. Yes, Diego, I'm aware that David Wood is a psychopath. I don't think that doesn't mean he's not a Christian either. Okay. Jamie says, if someone is Protestant, they should keep the Saturday Sabbath because it was not changed in Scripture. Well, again, Jamie, that assumes Protestantism is correct. If Protestantism is not correct, then the Sabbath will have to logically be Sunday, since that's what the That's what the rest of Christianity the world over adheres to. I'm going to watch this again. My thinking is you made some good points, but I think David isn't off as you suggest. No, I would say he's off by quite a wide margin. Again, he is, how should I say this? He is assuming liberalism and Protestantism are correct rather than proving it. He is looking at Christianity and thinking that it was just a Roman hybrid after Constantine. But again, when all you do is just compare Hellenist culture with the Christian culture that replaced it, it is night and day different. You can't confuse the two. And so I'm not going to say that David Wood is absolutely wrong in everything he said. There are a few points he made that are correct, that are valid. But at the end of the day, his inaccuracies are something to be marveled at. Okay. Let's continue.
Well, the only point here, there's nothing in your covenant that suggests that. So yeah, I don't know why we keep going over this. But yeah, I'm talking about the Christian perspective. The Christian perspective would have to be consistent with the New Testament. If you're talking about hacking people up, my goodness, over and over again, we're supposed to love everyone. We're supposed to pray for everyone. We're supposed to live in peace with everyone. And you can't do that if you're going around hacking up apostates, like Muhammad told his followers to do.
I mean, cite one Christian authority prior to
Jesus.
modernity,
Jesus,
who has the
Paul,
same interpretation as you, that you should let blasphemers just run wild in society, in Christian society. Name one Christian authority.
Jesus.
Okay.
And he says that, and he has absolutely no clue how ignorant that sounds. Here's the issue about that. Jesus is your authority, right? Jesus said that it's okay for you to tramp over his name. Jesus says it's okay for you to blaspheme his name whenever you want to get the chance with absolutely no repercussions. Jesus apparently was for all this. So, Dr. Wood, please explain to us why nobody got Jesus' memo for the next 1800 years. Why is that? Are you honestly going to suggest that that these Christians were piously reading the Bible, translating it from the Hebrew Aramaic roots it had to Greek, and from Greek to Latin, and to German, and to English, and to all other languages under the sun, and that all people were making these decisions of what should be translated in what way, and nobody encountered this command of Christ where he simply said, hey, you know what? It's okay. It's okay to just be milquetoast, peace, and love hippie. Nobody got the. Are you telling me that nobody in like the 1800s years of these behaviors had seen that? Really, David? See, who's wrong here, David? Is it the overwhelming consensus of 1800 years of church history? Or is it you? Who's more likely to be at fault? I'll let that sink in for a few more moments here. Let's see. Correct, Jamie. Threats of violence cannot reform people. That's why the church has always taught the right of conscience. That's why that's why instead of slaughtering heretics, right? Or rather, how would I put it? When Justinian was making his reforms, that's why instead of just using violence against pagans, you had two options: convert to the cause of Christ or be deported elsewhere, leave. And that's also why in the Spanish Inquisition, I'm not going to say the Spanish Inquisition, a better example is actually France. That's why in France, the Huguenots were able to live in France unmolested for the better part of a century and a half until they decided to become overly militant. And the St. Bartholomew's Mass Day and St. Bartholomew's Day massacre was the consequence of that. Threats of violence are never used against heretics and pagans. We just want them to keep their heresy and their paganism and their false religion to themselves. That's it. That you have your line, you have your aisle, you have your place, you have your people, stick to it. Oh, Diego's joining. Okay, Diego, as per usual, I'm going to lay out the rules. Once the ticker's done, I'll let you in. In the meantime, I'm going to mute up. We'll listen to the next part.
No, this is a circular argument. The whole question is interpreting what Jesus has said because you're saying that, again, don't lift the sword is something that applies to all of society. But how is that possible? How can that apply to all of society? Because invaders can come and annihilate the Christian nation if you take Jesus' statement, as you're doing, and apply it more widely to the societal level. That's the whole problem, David. And that's why no Christian prior to modernity said never punish blasphemers. Blasphemers should have freedom of speech and freedom of religion. Cite me one Christian authority who has this interpretation of Jesus's words. That's my question.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm giving you Jesus.
And he doesn't understand what he's talking about because David Wood has absolutely no conception of he has no conception of divine revelation outside of, well, his 66 book canon of scripture.
Yeah.
And so he has no church authority to appeal to. He has no sacred tradition which could govern him in such events and places. It doesn't exist with him.
Yeah. That's the way it is. That's the way it is because we Catholics have scripture, tradition, and the magisterium. He is sola scriptura, which is just the Bible by itself. And I think that's pretty much the essence of Protestantism, why it's led to so many denominations. And you have to remember, David Wood's just one of many Protestants. There are other Protestants who could disagree with his view of Christianity. And they all seem to appeal to the same authority, which is the Bible, but it doesn't really seem to help because they all have differing opinions, you know? They can't even come to terms with specific doctrinal points. That's what I think, you know? So
it's interesting you say that because I have private conversations with a YouTuber called Ryan the Presbyterian. Really nice guy.
Yeah.
It's
is he a Presbyterian?
He is. He is specifically he is Calvinist.
Calvinist, I see.
Mm-hmm. And so specifically what's going on is that I basically blatantly asked him that, because we were talking about the difference between him and standing for truth, and I was trying to explain to him that the distance between him and standing for truth is kind of a bit of a great distance, obviously, because standing for truth, Donnie, is much more fundamentalist, much more Fundy Baptist than Ryan is.
Fundy, yeah.
And
is that what you were? Is that what you were?
It was absolutely. I was a Fundy Baptist.
Fundy Baptist, yeah, because in the Fro, in the world of mere Christian apologetics, which is the things that we Christians of any denomination can agree on, we call those certain atheist fundies, because when they become atheists, they don't really change their fundamentalist mindset, you know? So it's both fundy Christian and fundy atheist. So you were a fundy Baptist, right?
Definitely, yeah.
Fundy.
And ironically, ironically enough, I all but became atheist, so no doubt. But what's going on? Yeah. What's going on?
You were an atheist.
I basically lived like one. Essentially, if you were to ask me whether or not I was Christian, I would have probably said yes, and I would have been a liar. I was essentially a functional atheist in everything but name.
Yeah, I see.
So what's going on here is that when I was telling Ryan that the distance between him and, say, Donnie, although it's a great distance, you don't need to travel long to get there. And he said, well, what stops us is that we have a respect for church authority. And it's like, all you have to do is use scripture in such a way that it kind of invalidates certain church authority, and then you have church authorities. And that's where you get from the road of confessional Presbyterianism, which he would affirm, to,
Yeah.
well, Baptist fundamentalism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so so the issue is David Wood is in this exact same boat. He cannot cite a single Christian authority prior to the 18th century that has his views, because
Mhm.
liberalism is alien to the church as Mars is to Earth.
Yeah, it's true. Because I mean, even the church has condemned liberalism as a sin. If I'm not wrong, maybe I'm
No, you
wrong.
are
I don't know if that's-
absolutely correct, Diego.
Yes,
And
it's
not
it's because liberalism has always been, especially during the French Revolution, it was very, very anti-Catholic. Not
Yeah.
today as much, but back during its early days, it was probably one of the catalysts for the French Revolution. Because if you realize, it wasn't just a revolution against the monarchy; it was also a revolution against the church. And many of those liberals, like, were inspired by Enlightenment thinkers who made fun of religion, like Voltaire and Rousseau and Montesquieu and many of those. And the church has always condemned liberalism. Unfortunately, many Protestants today have that kind of mindset. And I think maybe this is what could apply to David Wood's Christianity. I'm not sure if I'm correct on that. I'm just giving you my thoughts, So.
Right. Let me correct you on one thing. Liberalism is every bit as anti-Catholic today as it was in the French Revolution.
Oh,
it's just that their violence is not as on display.
Oh, I see.
For instance, in I don't know, are you American by the way, Diego?
I'm yes, I'm American. I was born here, but my parents are Mexican, by the way, just so you know.
Ah, nice. Okay, so what's going on here is that how to put it? Catholics in this country have never had the right of self-determination. We always we are now and always have been living under the boot of the other. If we had the ability to practice our religion and thoroughly implement it, it would be a better country today, and we arguably wouldn't have the problems we do. But moreover, you might have heard Protestants say that if a Catholic is saved, it's in spite of the Catholic Church, not because of it. You heard of that, right?
Yes, I've heard about it. Because they always talk about Catholics who are saved, but they're not because of the church. Because you know how they talk about the church as the whore of Babylon and the Pope is the Antichrist and all that garbage. You know,
you get it. So what's going on here is that liberalism is inherently colonialism, because it has to be. Essentially, like, the only reason liberalism has universal primacy is because both America and England spread this thing across the globe in very violent ways, I might add. And so what's going on here is that with liberalism, it's very much anti-Catholic, because it basically assumes Protestantism first and foremost as its foundation, and then liberalism is like the window dressing that goes on top of it. Like when you read Voltaire and Spinoza and like Hobbes and many of these Enlightenment liberalistic thinkers,
quote Enlightenment, Enlightenment, because it wasn't really an enlightenment.
True. And so when you look at these faux Enlightenment thinkers, you realize they are every bit as Protestant as Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Ulrich Zwingli. Every bit as Protestant.
Yeah, every bit as Protestant as all those Protestant, quote, reformers, just like you mentioned, Martin Luther, who's the daddy of all of them, Ulrich Zwingli, who was a contemporary of Martin Luther, who I believe is the one who invented the doctrine of memorialism, which is the doctrine that teaches that the Eucharist is just a symbol. That's actually one of the controversies that he and Luther had over the real presence of Christ. Obviously, Luther didn't believe in the real presence, but he believed in some forms, which is consubstantiation. And Zwingli came up with the doctrine.
No. Let me correct you there. No, Luther did believe in true presence, because if he didn't believe it, Lutherans today wouldn't believe it, and they do. Lutherans do believe in true presence of the Eucharist. What Luther rejected was transubstantiation.
Well, what they believed in was consubstantiation, which is sort of similar to that,
Correct. Yeah. And so, like, what's going on? For instance, our Orthodox and Coptic brothers and sisters also
Yeah.
do not have a dogma of transubstantiation, but they believe
That's
in
true.
the true presence of the new Eucharist nonetheless.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say. I might have gotten it wrong there. Since you're the expert, you're the one who can school me there, my friend. I'm just coming here
Oh,
to give you company.
I never claimed to be an expert, but thank you for the compliment. But in any
No,
case,
you are. Yeah.
but in any case, what's going on is that liberalism is liberalism is essentially colonialistic even today, because when you see Protestants today, then the vast majority undoubtedly would love a liberal state.
Yeah.
What they would say is that if there is a Catholic that is saved, it is because of the Catholic Church. It is inspired of the Catholic Church, not because of it. Essentially, what they say is that, yeah, you can claim the name Catholic, you can claim to be Catholic, but you cannot be Catholic in any meaningful sense or way and be part of the big boys club. And that's why when we look at people like Hemet Meta, who I've christened, who I christened the Brown Klansman, that's
Yeah,
when
I talked to you about him, remember? That's how I met you, Fro. That's how I met you.
Yeah.
We're talking about that guy, the Brown Klansman, because he's very, very anti-Catholic and very, very anti-religious in general. He's not friendly at all. That's a better name for him.
Yeah. And so when the Brown Klansman is yes.
Sorry, man, you just make me laugh with that name. But I think that's a better name for him than that. You know?
Well, it's true. He's every bit as big in it. I might as well make it official. So so when he's speaking, right, and he's saying that when he's saying that Catholic hospitals shouldn't exist, or what he's essentially saying is that it is impossible for you to be a practicing Roman pious Catholic and have a say in our medical system. That our medical system basically serves as a way of excluding you. Essentially,
And that's exactly how I met you, because we were talking about.
Yeah.
I was asking Sean Hussey to do a response to his video, but you said it's not worth it. It's just a waste of time. You know.
Is.
And then that's how I got to know you, my friend. I think the Lord really used that as a chance to meet a friend like you. You know.
Good. Well, God bless you then.
Yeah, indeed. No, so it's because I found someone in you that really is talking my language. So I know where I really saw in you someone who knows where I'm coming from. That's why I really saw it.
And that's why I think, especially South American and Central and South American Catholicism, it is needed and necessary, because we need you people, because here in the States we have become so brainwashed and so
it's true, my friend.
Yeah, we've become so duped by the poison of liberalism that we forget that there are ways of interpreting the West outside of it. And so Mexico, having been a Spanish colony, doesn't have this understanding of liberalism, and thank God for it, because the Catholics coming up from there can bring their perspective of the faith and really educate us. And I know I've been educated from it.
Yeah.
And so what's going on? But the unfortunate thing is that the Brown Klansman is right.
Right.
Ultimately that today's society is structured in a way that excludes Catholics from any meaningful way of public life. For instance, something about that is that in California, you cannot be an adoption agency. You cannot want a better life for children between a mother and a father and be a Catholic, right?
Yeah, that's true, indeed. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true.
And
that's where I was born, by the way. I'm from California, so you know.
Get out. Okay, go to Texas.
No. That's where I was born, but I don't live there. I live in Tennessee right now.
Oh, thank God. Okay, good. All right. So what's going on here is that what is at stake? What's at stake here is that how to put it? Liberalism is inherently anti-Catholic, because what it says that you can be Catholic, right, in name, but you can't be Catholic in any meaningful way. You cannot govern your own communities with the laws that you hold dear. All right, you cannot take Catholic morality and live by its applications. It's
That's true.
impossible.
Mhm.
And so what's going on is that liberalism is anti-Catholic. It's just its power is, how to put it, it's arguably more powerful today than it ever has been, but it's just soft power. It's just it's a velvet fisted, it's a velvet iron fist.
Yeah, it's well disguised, basically.
Yeah, in fact, it's something that America's done, which I find completely degenerate, and I was shocked to discover this. That one of the ways in which, how should I say this? One of the criteria in which African nations have to receive aid from America is by handing out free contraception to its people. For instance, Uganda is a heavily Christian nation, a heavily Catholic nation, I might add.
Yeah.
But what's going on is that for Uganda to receive aid from America, and then you even see this in places like Kenya and Tanzania.
Yeah.
All of these places have traditional Muslim and traditional Christian values. That is to say, Sunni Islam and Catholicism. Okay?
Yes.
In order to receive aid, both of these religious faith traditions have to accept a way of life completely antithetical to their religious devotions.
Which is sad.
They basically have to throw away God's law for the time in order to get aid, in order to eat for that day. That's a problem.
I understand. That's very unfortunate. That's very unfortunate.
And that's the thing, because what we see is the liberalism being enforced almost as a religion. Because what does Jesus say? Jesus says, when you give aid, when you give charity, don't yet let your left hand do what your right hand is doing. What that means is don't measure, just give as much as needed. However, what America's done, we have basically made charity a price tag. It's like, you want these things? You want to eat today? Well, you basically need to adopt our theological position of liberalism. And if you don't, well, you can eat sand and starve.
I see.
And that's part of the violence in which has been that's the violence in which has been established in this country. Hold on, did you leave something in the private chat, by the way? Okay, it was something else. Right. Okay. Well, could you at least say goodbye, Diego. Man, manners. Okay. I'm going to stream for the next 4 minutes here. Then I'm going to put it up. It was very nice talking to you, Diego. I'm glad to have met a friend in you. Okay, well, let's play. Better mute up.
Words. There is no one who comes after
You're
Jesus.
You are not Jesus, right? So
there is no one who comes
others have
after...
to interpret his words to understand what Jesus meant, right? So I want someone to corroborate your interpretation of Jesus's words prior to modernity.
I'm not
citation.
I'm not interpreting.
I cited you many Christian authorities
I'm not
who have the opposite interpretation of you. Who have the opposite interpretation of you.
If they are not in line with the New Testament, then they've got issues. And again, you don't start getting these guys. You don't start getting these guys until Christianity merges with the Roman Empire. So I understand where they got their ideas. The point is, if you're saying, hey, we need to go out and subjugate and build a Christian society and crush blasphemers, you just got no basis for that in Scripture. And that's a very simple point. So, I mean, are you seriously saying I have to...
So how about this?
I have to establish society based on Theodosius, not on Jesus. It's a very, very strange idea. And I mean, didn't you even agree that Jesus wasn't establishing a society and so on?
Yeah, I agree because the Islamic understanding is Jesus is refining the Mosaic law. He's not abrogating it. So it still applies, but he is not there to introduce a new Sharia, a new set of laws. He is trying to redirect the believers at that time towards a true message of worshiping God alone, because there had been a lot of tahrif, a lot of additions and corruption that had come. And that's the whole purpose of prophets over time. These are the prophets that come successively to remind people of the correct way to live life. And Jesus was among them, peace be upon him, and he's going to return, inshallah. He's going to return in the end of times to kill the Antichrist and to establish the kingdom of heaven on earth. This is what we truly believe. Look, in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16 through 17, what do you say about this? All scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. So this is in the New Testament, and it's saying that all scripture is relevant. All scripture for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so that confirms not only what I'm saying about the relevance of the Old Testament, it confirms all of these other Christian authors and authorities of the church who are also saying that. You're the only one, and this liberalized Christianity, who has to distance yourself from the history of Christianity because it is not liberal and it's not secular.
Can we get a compilation of just a bunch of the hot takes that Daniel Haqiqatjou has made throughout this entire debate? Because he's been right on everything he said. Point by point by point by point, he has absolutely slaughtered and dismantled David Wood's argument. And he's not even able to understand how or why, but he's right. David Wood accepts Christianity on the terms of atheistic secularism and liberalism. He doesn't have any conception of Christianity outside of that. It just doesn't exist to him. And that is a sad thing, because Christianity is so much more richer than what David Wood is willing to accept at the moment. It's really a shame. Christianity is beautiful when you're able to free it from the confines that society has placed around it. Well, I think that'll do it for today. I think I've kind of been on here long enough. I got quite a few guests on between Praise, Jamie, Diego. I think there was another guy that joined a little ago. At least he kind of tuned in. No, I think it was just Praise, Jamie, and Diego. Anyway, what we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is a Muslim that has a better understanding of Christianity than the Christian he's debating does. And I don't know if Haqiqatjou's a PhD, but Wood certainly is. He's got no excuse for being this terrible. He just doesn't. This was absolutely embarrassing in a traumatizing way for Wood. And again, I think I mentioned this before in one of the other parts to this debate, but Wood had the audacity to post this debate on his channel. I don't know why. He didn't do good. He did terrible. He did awful. He was slaughtered. He was slaughtered 6 ways till Sunday. There is no reason David Wood should take pride there is no reason he should take pride in what he's done here. No reason. But for some reason, he takes pride in enough to demonstrate it to the entire world. I'm beyond words. Anyway, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This has been your host, Fro, with another installment of The Pale Galilean. And I think that'll be everything. I think we covered what I wanted to do within the time allotted to me. It's been 2.5 hours, and I'm hungry. I'm going to eat. So with that being said, always pray the rosary, and Viva Cristo Rey. Bye-bye, everybody. Fro signing out.